Good morning, everyone. My name is Raina Ghazi, and I'm the Teacher Development Manager for Macmillan Education International Curriculum. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Welcome to the final webinar of a series of 4 webinars sponsored by Macmillan Education and the Confucius Institute at Oxford Brookes University. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the questions box. I'll do my best to try to answer those questions if they're related to audio at all in particular. The first presenter for our session today is Dr. Daw, who I will pass it over to now. Thank you.
Hello, my old and new friends. Welcome to my talk. My name is Luan Duo. I'm currently working at the University of Edinburgh as the Chinese Language Program Director. It is my pleasure to meet you again. Today, my journey with you will come to the end. So we, including Zhou Hongfeng, Zhu, Shelley Lao Shi, and I, would like to thank you all for coming to the series of our trainings. Also, I would like to thanks to Macmillan Education and the Confucius Institute at Oxford Brookes University for organizing this event and providing us a platform to share our online teaching and learning in Chinese. Today, my session is around 10 minutes long. I would like to wrap up my topics by focusing on reflection and application from our previous 3 CPDs. So my topic here is, the title is a bit boring, so just called Q&A, Reflection and Application. So now we are coming to the next slide. Same as before, on the left is my picture. Today, I have a little assistant teacher, a mini cartoon figure of me again on the right top of the screen. On the right-hand side is the session outline today. So after this session, I will share the way of using Bitmoji in your presentation, introduce a program to turn the links to QR code, compare the shared Word document with OneNote. By the end of the session, I hope that you will feel more confidence in using these 3 programs in preparing your online teaching. Okay. After my 2 online sessions, many friends and teachers either followed me on Twitter or joined in my WeChat. Thank you so much. And many of you have directly left some questions and messages to me with regards to teaching Chinese in foreign language. So today's session, I will organize my part by the question which some of attendees have approached me in the last few weeks. So the first question is in Chinese. 请问您 PPT 中的人物表情是你自己的吗？是用什么软件做的？ Is it a little cartoon figure me? Which program did I use? For this answer, yes, it's me. The one I use is Bitmoji. If you have this app, you could find any recent Bitmoji image which is related to current news or events. It is a great way to engage with your students and make your lesson fun, more approaching. Actually, it's very easy to embed your Bitmoji into your presentation. At first, what you need to do is download this app to your mobile, register account. You need to pay attention here that you need to make sure you register your account by using the same email address as you register for Google account. Okay, or unless you have a Google account. So second stage. When you have an account, then welcome to Bitmoji World. You can create your image, different hair, or because I have this hair, so I have the hair, or you can have any fancy hairs you want, or eyes, or face, or clothes, and they even have a wardrobe to store your old clothes. So once you're happy with your creation, then use a laptop or computer. Okay, so you can go to Google Chrome, log into your Bitmoji account. There, you could embed your Bitmoji account to Google Chrome search bar. Okay, sorry. There. Okay. here it is. So next time you open up a Google Chrome, the app is there. You just need to click, then you will find many images. Choose your favorite one by clicking the right button of your mouse, then save the image. Go to any document or presentation, just paste it in. So if you say, what am I going to do with emoji? And there you are. I would like to, if you say I would like to find more ideas about how to use Bitmoji for education purpose. So you can go to this Facebook. I put a QR code here. If you can scan QR code, you can see there's a web link over there. So this is a great number of MFL, which is modern foreign language teacher, not just in Chinese, in Spanish, Italian, any other language. They post the ideas there is how they use emoji to teach. So they will give you a brilliant, fantastic tips for preparing your lesson. So it's very nice. A Facebook group, yeah, certainly have explore. Okay. So next question I got is how to generate a QR code. A few teachers come to ask me about how to create a QR code. Well, it's not really about the Chinese language teaching, but I assume knowing it will help you teaching, right? So I list here the one I often use is QR code monkey. Here is the website. So when you get into the website, insert your address here, and then you just press enter. Voila, your QR is generated. And then you press the blue button to save as image. And the beauty is it is free. So we love free. We're free to use it. And that's the second question. The third question today is what are the difference between OneNote and a shared document when doing group writing? The question is not very clear, but put this way, OneNote is also shared document. So let me assume the teacher wants to ask, here is a shared Word document, right? So to me, OneNote is 4-dimension. That means you could add endless message on the left, right, up and down. So the screen just expand in that way and that way. But Word document is 2-dimension. So you probably use Word document all the time. So you know you either can put the message in front and down, you go this way, right? That's the reason I like OneNote, is 4 dimensions. So I like OneNote also is because it organizes in a very clear visual way. See here, you could create pages, not like a Word document. You have to just scroll it down and down and down to find the next session. And particularly one session I like the most is you insert an image to OneNote. You could draw on the image directly. Here you could see I paste a HSK4 test into the OneNote. Students could circle the answer out directly. So to be honest, I'm a visual learner. The function I like is the insert bar. See, you could direct record your voice or video to OneNote. Can you imagine that? It saves you time to use other program and embed it into your OneNote or Word document. Your student could do the same. You could do video conversation with OneNote. You just paste it. All right. So it's there. You can see radio recording message here. All right, so that's the three. Quite a lot teachers come back with about these 3 areas, and that's it. That's today's my session is very short and brave. But before I finish, which is I say last but not least, let me back what I mentioned in our first webinar. Whatever tool we use for our hybrid teaching or remote teaching, the pedagogies should come to the first. Those tools are helping us to deliver a good lesson, but please make sure not to be driven by those tools. There are some points I would like to highlight again. First, using what you're confident with. All right. If you don't feel right, then maybe it's not the time. So second, don't make a simple task complicated. If you just straightforward, keep it simple. We often then said less and better. And the next one, trying your task before asking your students to do so. You always changing into a student's perspective to see if I use this program, how I'm going to it. Is it complicated or not? Next one, thinking of your workload. We live in this quite strange situation. We are going to do a hybrid teaching for next academic years. So think about your workload. What can you manage for your work? Next one, clear instruction to your students. That's very important. It's not like in class, you can give some verbal explanation to your students. But here, because you not often see your students, so always make your instruction clear. Last, paying attention on digital footprints and online security. We use a lot of third-party program. Always have a look. Have a think whether we leak students' data out or not. All right. So if you would like to exchange your learning and teaching experience with me in the future, again, here are my social media link. You could add me in as WeChat or follow me on the Twitter. Many thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy my webinars. So now let me pass the floor to 周鸿峰老师. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Here's from London, and it's nice to meet you all here. And in today's session, I'm going to briefly talk about the last session regarding the digital resources for Chinese characters and the pinyin teaching. And then we will move on to the topic of today's session, which is to answer questions from you all. And I will try and respond to as many questions as I can. Sorry, I don't think we can see your screen. It's just a white screen. So,
yeah.
Sorry. That's okay. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Apologize for that.
No problem.
Okay. So anyway, thank you. So today's session, mainly we want to reflect and to respond to the questions we received regarding the session I offered 2 weeks ago. So last session, I talked about the challenges we are facing and when we move to online teaching, and also I introduced some digital resources related to character and pinyin, such as the one informative website with knowledge about Chinese characters and online dictionaries, and also etymological explanations about the characters at the end, and also introduce some online tools such as whiteboard. And it helps greatly to demonstrate and monitor handwriting during the session. And also I introduced 2 free tools to help teachers to create some online exercises, such as matching or crosswords, etc. And at the end, I introduced OneNote. This app helps teachers to mark handwritten homework in an efficient way. And some of you may not have attended the session, last session. So don't worry, I will share the online resources with you all at the end of my presentation today. And because I added some new resources on the page as well. So now I'm going to move to the key part of today's session to share the questions received from you all about the Chinese characters teaching and learning. Since we moved to online teaching, online assessments have been implemented at many universities
And for Chinese language assessment, one of the key elements we have to consider it is whether students should complete the written exam, particularly the essay writing, in either handwriting or typing. And this is one of the mostly asked questions we received. Okay, when we move to online, we have to ask them to do the handwriting or the typing. Okay, the second most asked question is how to teach Chinese characters or how to practice Chinese characters online, mainly focus on about the method, how to. And also there are several questions received about assessment of Chinese characters. And this is all what I will discuss today in the following a few, about 10 minutes. Okay, so often we have students who are used to taking notes by pinyin rather than characters in our classroom. And these students prefer to write in pinyin and properly think in pinyin as well. So their writing and reading skills are behind their oral and listening skills. This has impact on their overall progress on their Chinese language development. As pinyin, as we all know, is not helpful for differentiating homophone vocabulary. Okay, so Chinese characters are very challenging when students start learning Chinese. But on the other hand, handwritten Chinese characters can be fascinating for students. Some students decide to learn Chinese because of beautiful characters. And other students find the writing characters more interesting than what they thought at the beginning. So writing Chinese characters, like the image I show you, okay, helps students to get a better understanding of characters and will improve student confidence in their Chinese abilities. This is why handwriting rather than typing is crucial for beginners. And handwriting practice will definitely help them memorize characters, improve their reading skills, and extend their vocabulary. Of course, you can see here on this slide, sample I show you, that some errors regarding the strokes on certain strokes, and this is why we need to emphasize the handwriting at the beginning for beginners particularly. And the right this picture show you for advanced level, we can then to typing mainly focus on about the sentence, the grammar, structure, etc. So for intermediate and advanced level students, once they have obtained a certain amount of characters, they can use typing rather than handwriting for their work. But it does not mean that beginners are not allowed to type characters on computers or phones. Nowadays, we use computers or phones to connect outside the world, and typing Chinese is essential for them for their online communication. So this is my opinions on the typing and handwriting. When we teach Chinese characters, what should we consider? A single Chinese characters is considered from the perspective of form and the meaning and sound. The combination of these three elements is essential for recognizing the characters. But when we're thinking about the form of a character, we must look at the strokes, order, components, and structure. And these four aspects are very important for accurately writing characters. So when we teach characters, the basics, what we should think about when we teach characters. So most people agree that it is essential for teachers to introduce characters at the initial stage because writing characters is a valuable asset to Chinese language learning. As teachers, we have to acknowledge that it is incredibly important to guide students onto the right track when students start writing Chinese characters. Even though I mentioned the initial stage, this does not necessarily mean that students need to learn to write from the very first point they learn Chinese. It's a different concept, okay? Neither does it mean that they need to be able to write everything what they can say. Generally, recognition first and then followed by writing practice is better. Understanding how Chinese characters are constructed is very useful for students. Anyone can learn to write Chinese if they have the right knowledge about Chinese characters and the right approach. Strokes are the smallest unit in a character. There are some basic rules about stroke order. Getting to know strokes and its order in a character is helpful to ensure students succeed with more complicated characters. So most Chinese characters are compound characters, and usually these characters can be broken down into different components, mainly two categories: phonic component and semantic component. And it is important to understand each component has a function in the characters, and this will definitely help students to learn and memorize the character. The etymological explanation of a character is like a story of characters, origin and development. It helps learners, particularly for adult learners, to understand the history of individual characters and the Chinese culture development as well. So I think it's very important. Also, for some of you mentioned about for the heritage speaker, I think it's quite important to introduce this part to the heritage speaker because they have certain knowledge in their already. So it is quite important to share this etymological explanation of the characters to help them to understand more about the Chinese language and the culture from this perspective. So when we ask students to write the Chinese characters, I think it is very important to let students use character in a context to make this process more meaningful rather than simply to look at or copy characters to remember them passively. We should consider preparing some writing tasks for students to let them write characters and then form a whole piece of writing. Next point, it is giving feedback. Giving feedback is essential when learning a language. For beginners, it is difficult for them to spot some mistakes by themselves, and they might repeat the same mistake if they are not aware of it. So it is very important for teachers to pick out the wrongly written characters as the samples and then share them with students. It is also a good idea to ask students to identify and correct the mistakes. Many Chinese characters comprise 2 or more components, and breaking down the character into different components help students to remember characters. And also for us as teachers, we can provide sets of similar looking characters and let students to spot the difference by comparing them, help them to set up the connection among characters to help them to memorize characters. Also, last time I shared do you remember there's one website, it's particularly for intermediate level students. It will be very helpful for them to set up based on each unit, the radicals or component. They can find the characters to share the same component on the website. It will be very helpful for intermediate level students as well. So, so based on this, and we can think about how to design different activities to help students recognize, memorize, and then afterwards be able to write, to produce the Chinese characters. For recognition, I think I list some activities like the quiz, we all know, I think, flashcards, or pairing, or forum discussion, etc. And for the writing, we can think about the dictation. This is old-fashioned, but for beginners, it's quite helpful. Translation and word buildings and making sentence, etc. So I think you have more ideas on this. I'm happy to for you to share your thoughts with us later on regarding activities for teaching Chinese characters. We can share together. So now I'm going to move to about assessment. I saw some questions about assessment of Chinese characters, and generally speaking, it is hard to have a separate summative assessment of Chinese character, because it's always a part of the course. So very often it is embedded in the written exam and become part of it. But as a teacher, I think we should focus on more about the formative assessment of Chinese character during the term to monitor closely about the progress of students for the character writing. For beginners, we can work on the understanding of characters from different angles. For example, I maybe cannot see clearly. So for example, these characters, we can focus on pronunciation, meaning, structure, left and right structure, and also emphasize the order, check whether they know how to write it, and let them to building a words, making a sentence, and also later on they can write some characters they know with the same radical or same components, etc. So I think this practice, particularly for beginner at the beginning, is crucial for them. Mainly, we need to make sure students have the right habit they need to know what's the right way to learn the characters. So this is my thoughts for the beginner. For intermediate learners, we can design some formative assessment based on the components, like this one component to connect different characters, to help them to remember the new one, and also to go back to review the characters they know already. So also nowadays, when we think about online session, we need to design some online formative assessment or exercises to make Chinese characters studying more efficiently and effectively. For example, last time I share the free web learning apps.org. This one, you can create your online exercises to help students to memorize characters as well. So overall, this is today's session. I focus on more about to talk a little bit how to teach characters, and also regarding my thoughts about activities, and also like a formative assessment exercise design for the characters learning. So now I would like to say, if you don't know this website, you feel free to scan the barcode and you can access this website. And I added some new website resources I found might be useful for you. And also thank you for those who contribute to share the resources last time as well. And if you would like to share your resources, you're welcome to post on this page as well. And also, if you have any question, feel free to drop me a line. This is my email address, hongfen.zojo@kcl.ac.uk. And finally, I want to say thank you for everyone, and also thanks for Confucius Institute at Oxford, Brookes University, and also Macmillan Education to give me this opportunity to meet you all, our lovely audience, although we can't see you. And I'm looking forward to have further discussion with you all. Okay, thank you so much. And now I'm going to move to our next speaker, Dr. Zhu, to talk about the Chinese grammar and beyond. Okay, and now it's Dr. Zhu's turn. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my session. I will be answering questions regarding the teaching of Chinese grammar and go a little bit beyond. My name is Zhu, and I'm from the University of Leeds. This is, in fact, the last week of my work at the University of Leeds. I have accepted an offer of the University of Aberdeen, and I look forward to starting work with the prestigious Scottish University from the coming Monday. The questions I will be answering were sent by audience from the last 3 webinars. The questions are very, very important. I find the answers to these questions are vital to us as teachers. No matter we are going to go back to physical classrooms, or we're going to take a hybrid teaching mode, or we will be solely teaching online. And these questions are roughly all around 2 very, very important perspectives that we should be looking at when we are thinking of teaching a foreign language. They are approaches and strategies. Now, first of all, let's talk about the approach that I think we should be taking when teaching the Chinese grammar. First of all, we should be taking a communicative approach. By a communicative approach, I mean that there should be a lot of interaction between the teacher and the students. And what you teach, what ask your students to exercise must be meaningful. You don't want your exercise to be rigid and mechanical. Interactive and meaningful are 2 very important factors when we're thinking of a communicative approach to language teaching. Strategies. What should we do when we teach? What kind of strategies should we take? Rule number 1 is that we should take very simple language. It's not a very good idea to use a lot of very complex terminologies, jargons. No, simple language will be easier to get into your students' heart. And we should set a very clear context for students to understand in what kind of situation the structures that we are teaching can be applicable. And at the same time, we should place a lot of emphasis on encouraging our students to apply, to use, very actively use the structures that we have just taught them in speaking and in writing. And I'm going to answer the following questions today and give you some examples. First of all, what is a suitable age to start receiving grammar teaching? Should I avoid using English when teaching Chinese grammar rules? I will be giving you an example after the first two questions, and they will help you to really understand what I mean by the answers that I give to the two questions. And after that, I will be talking about how to teach Chinese grammar efficiently, no matter whether it's in a traditional classroom or online. And after that, this question number 4, I guess, is a question that a lot of you need to really think about all the time. Many students can do grammar exercises correctly, but then make mistakes using the same grammar in productive language. Why? We can't completely resolve the problem, but we should constantly think about it and to find good ways to help our students, to make our teaching more effective, and to help students to minimize the frustration that they feel. And next, how do we combine grammar analysis and grammar exercises effectively? Question 4 and question 5 are connected to each other. Therefore, I will give you another example to help illustrate my answers. And let's come to the first question first. Now, right, my screen, yeah, okay, and right, yes. What is a suitable age to start receiving grammar teaching or explicit grammar teaching? Many researchers have looked into this question. A very short and general answer to this question is about 7 years of age. I'm not saying that we should be teaching exactly the same structures in exactly the same ways when we teach a 7-year-old and a 17-year-old. And of course, it depends on their age group. We need to use different methods and to go for different contents. But at least we're confident that a child who is at an age of around 7 should be able to understand and receive some explicit grammar teaching. And should I avoid using English when teaching Chinese grammar rules? My answer is short and clear. No, don't. Because students share the language of rich resources of the Chinese language classroom. If English is a shared language of your classroom, why waste the very rich resources? Researchers have been talking about native language transfer, in other words, impact of the learner's mother tongue on their learning of a foreign language. We have been talking about the positive impacts and negative impacts. If English is a shared language of your classroom, use it to help your students to understand the similarities and differences between the two languages, and go for efficient exercises and understand better the problems they have, the mistakes that they make when they use some Chinese language, Chinese grammar structures. And we as teachers should constantly really compare the two languages and to know better about the similarities and differences so that we can help our students in a more efficient way, and again to help minimize the frustration that they may feel. And I will give you an example to show you how I normally do when it comes to word order when I teach at the elementary level. We know that word order is something that Chinese learners find difficult to deal with. They are constantly told by their teachers that again, a mistake. The word order is wrong. It should be in another place in the sentence rather than the order that they followed. Very often, they find it very frustrating. They feel that they have to remember a lot of rules in order to get the order right. And I will just show you an example, what I would normally do regarding some sentences. If you give them too many rules, it might be very difficult for them to follow. And if you can find a rule that can roughly cover a wide range and is easy to understand, why not go for it? Let's have a look at the sentences that I will be using as examples. 我去商店. And normally we would want to tell them that in Chinese, which is very similar to that in English, where the subject goes first and then the main verb and then the object. 我明天去商店. And you want to tell them where to place the time phrase. 我明天去商店买礼物. And when you want to deal with the so-called 联动, and you would want to possibly think of a way to help them to deal with this very easily. And if you want to give them this sentence, 我明天开车去商店买礼物. And you may want to say, well, how do you place the phrase referring to the means of transport in the sentence? And there's an easy way for them to follow that without trying too hard to remember a rule. And if you want to again introduce with whom in the sentence, how you would do. And poor rules are rules that are tedious and mechanical and require a lot of time and energy for students to memorize. And we often hear that they say, I can't memorize so many rules. Therefore, we need to find good rules to help them. Good rules are easy to understand and they are highly applicable. They can come naturally for the learners and they don't find it difficult to follow. So again, these sentences, when we teach 我去商店, it is tedious and mechanical if you just say, just like that in English, Chinese is a SVO language. And if you stop there, students would be lost because not very many learners are familiar with even basic grammatical terms. You may have come across students who ask you, what is a subject? What is an object? But at the same time, we find it very important for them to understand that just like in English, Chinese is a SVO language. So it's absolutely fine for you to say this sentence, Chinese is a SVO language, but follow up with some simple explanation. And it's always good to give students a fun example that they can always remember with no effort. So, 我爱你, if you say, just like that in English, if I want to say I love you, I say I love you in Chinese. It's exactly the same word order. That might stick in their mind for longer. And if you want to teach them where to place the time phrase by giving them this example, 我明天去商店. It is a rule for them to try to memorize if you just say an adverbial phrase of time goes before the verb. So they have to remember, yes, before the verb. I must remember before the verb. And then if you want to say, 我明天去商店买礼物. So there are a few verbs that you have to use for that. And in Chinese, we say this is a 联动 situation. And in fact, if you just say, this is a sentence with several verb phrases, students will be like, all right, which one goes first? Is there a rule for me to memorize? And again, if you give them another sentence, which is 我明天坐公共汽车去商店买礼物, meaning to teach them where to place the time phrase. I mean the phrase referring to the means of transport. And you will say, well, the phrase by plus a transport means has to go before the verb. Students will be like, yes, I will memorize that. But you also said that the time phrase has to go before the verb. Which one comes first then? You see, that would generate a lot of further questions for the students. And then if you want to teach students how to say with whom you do something and where to place the with whom phrase in the sentence by saying the with whom information comes with the subject or comes before the verb. And the student will be like, okay, it comes with the subject, comes with the subject before the verb. Where exactly? If I have a few factors, which one should I place first? You see, that generates further questions again. Now, how do we find a very easy rule for them to follow them? Ask them. Ask the students, what is the chronological order of all the elements? You see, if we go back to number 2, 我明天去商店. Just ask students to think. Okay, now you're talking about yourself. So I comes first. You're talking about yourself. And when the time comes to tomorrow, you will go to the shop. So tomorrow, the timing comes before the action, and naturally, that's the order you will follow. It's the same thing. If you want to talk about, I will go to the shop to buy presents tomorrow, the natural time order, the natural chronological order is I comes first, and the timing tomorrow comes. When the timing comes, I will go to the shop. And only when I go to the shop, I will buy presents there. You see, that's a natural chronological order for all these factors. And if you ask students to follow this, which is very natural a rule to follow, it's quite easy for them to understand. And let's move on to number 4. I will go to the shop to buy presents by bus tomorrow. So if we say that sentence in English, that's the order we follow. And I'm sure that's something, that's the information flying about in your English-speaking students. Again, ask them to think, what is the chronological order of all the elements? When tomorrow comes, I would jump on a bus to go to the shop to buy presents. You see, that's that's the natural chronological order that you would follow when you talk about all these elements. And again, we will move to number 5. We can use exactly the same technique to help students to deal with the word order problem. So if you want to say, I will go to the shop to buy presents by bus tomorrow with my mother. The real or the realistic chronological order is I joining my mother, jumping on a bus, going to a shop to get presents. And the time will come before all the actions that we will be doing. So 明天, of course, will come before jumping on a bus. So if you just use this question to ask your student, what is the chronological order of all the elements? It is to invite opinions from your students, so that's interactive, and it is meaningful because it's tightly related to what you're going to help them to realize. And it would be much easier for students to follow, especially for number 4, for that 坐公共汽车 part, because in an English speaking student mind, they would be thinking to go there by bus. But in Chinese, we say to take the bus to go there. And of course, you can go from the angle where you say in Chinese, we don't usually say to take by bus. We would normally say to take the bus to somewhere. That's again to add your students' burden. And of course, you can say that it's important for them to know it. But when it comes to word order, encourage them to think what the chronological order is for all the elements that they would like to include in their sentences. And I'm saying that this is for elementary level. Even if when it comes to advanced level, always encourage your students to approach a series of events that they want to talk about in a very advanced sentence that they want to compose. It's a good idea. Okay, and I will move on to my next question. How do you teach Chinese grammar effectively, or how do you teach Chinese grammar effectively online in particular? And I would think that the fundamental answers to these questions are basically the same. No matter whether you are teaching in a physical classroom or to teach online, all the following are factors that you should be thinking about. First of all, again, you should take a communicative approach. It's not a one-way traffic when you teach grammar. It must be interactive, meaningful. And when it comes to contents, you must be aware how much you teach. Not too little, not too much, just enough. And you must, you might say that, well, that's very abstract. Yes, and the following 2 factors will help you to decide how much. The purpose of the class and your learner's age. And you should always consider the timing of introducing a grammatical structure as well. So not too soon, not too late, just in time. Again, that's something very, very abstractive. And if you consider what grammar they have already learned and what grammar or especially related grammar they are going to learn very soon, that might help you to decide the timing on teaching some grammar. And there are some practical considerations that you should bear in mind. First of all, flipped classroom. Flipped classroom is very important for our teaching. We should always set some tasks before the actual class for students to try on, at least. This will prepare them for the main classes. But to what extent? You don't want to give them too little. You don't want to give them something meaningful and boring, in their words, to do. And at the same time, you don't want to give them too much to confuse them. And to what extent is very closely to what you are going to teach and the methods that you're going to use. And I will further illustrate by giving you an example later on. And also, when you're teaching grammar, don't let vocabulary and the examples that you give them to be in the way. The vocabulary has to be the ones that they have learned. You don't want students to try to understand the structure and at the same time struggling with understanding or recognizing some characters. And the examples that you give them must be meaningful. They can't be left to chances. There is always a reason why you give one example, not another. And of course, we should not include structures that we have not learned in an example that you give to students, because that would just confuse them. And it's very, very, very important to give them feedback. And some teachers might be hesitating, correcting students' mistakes all the time. You think that might make them feel frustrated. Well, it depends how you give them feedback. Give them constructive feedback. Tell them why it is wrong and in what way they can improve. I'm sure they welcome that kind of feedback. And the online dimension. So all the factors I have just talked about are applicable to classroom teaching and online teaching. And when it comes to the online dimension, there are two things you must bear in mind. First of all, students' motivation. You do not see your students. If you only teach online, you do not see them physically. How to motivate them? That is a big question to answer, and I don't suppose I have enough time to illustrate that today, but that's something we must bear in mind. And how to give your students individual attention. Some students may become more brave when learn online because they feel that they are in their own space and it's their comfortable zone. And you will find that some quiet students suddenly become more talkative when they are asked to answer your questions in writing on the chat, in the chat room, for example. But some students started to hide behind. How do you give your students individual attention? It's something that we would really think about when we talk about online teaching. And now, many students can do grammar exercise correctly, but then make mistakes using the same grammar in productive language. Why? This is a question I often ask myself. And I'm very pleased that some of you raised this question as well. I think it is a very important question that we should all explore together. I believe there are many various reasons leading to this problem. But we as teachers should really look at the following two through our teaching and through supporting students' autonomous learning. First of all, this problem may come because students learned this grammar out of context. They know in theory what the structure is, but they don't know when and how to use it. And there is a lack of adequate understanding of the functions. So they know in theory what the functions are, what they can used for, but when it comes to real life, when they want to produce something in speaking and in writing, they don't really know which one to go for. So there is a degree of understanding, but a lack of adequate understanding. Which leads to my fifth question. How do we combine grammar analysis and grammar exercises effectively? Well, I would think that they are always intertwined. They are embedded in each other. There's no clear analysis and now exercise. They should complement each other. In other words, if it's in your classroom, your analysis must be backed up constantly by meaningful exercises. So you should give suitable amount of analysis at the right time. And your exercises and analysis must be context-based and meaningful. And you must have noticed that I have used the word meaningful a lot. And you will see what I really mean by looking at the example that I'm going to give now. So if I were to teach the structures related to past events, what kind of context-based communicative approach am I going to take? I will pause a moment and let my audience to think. what the structures are that we need as Chinese speakers when we talk about past events. Yes, 了 yes, 是的 yes, 过 But don't forget that very often we don't need something to talk about these events. And I will give you some examples. If my learners are university students and they are at the level of beginners level, and the problems that I want to resolve or avoid is rigid understanding of rules and numerous errors that they make in productive language, meaning when they produce something themselves in speaking or writing, and the sequence of thoughts that I would encourage you to follow, and also encourage you to encourage your students to follow, is what do I intend to say when I talk about all these past events? Because there's no tense in Chinese. So when Chinese people approach past events, there's a different angle. So what do I intend to say? Which structure can achieve the intended meaning? So I always say to my students, don't say or don't ask which structure should I use. Ask yourself, which structure do I need to use to express what I mean to say? And then when we have decided, or when your students have correctly decided which structure to go for, then think of all the fine details related to that particular structure. And just now, I emphasized on the importance of a flipped classroom. So before the class, you need to give students some task. What I do is to establish a context. It's very important to establish a context, especially when it comes to talking about the past. So I gave them this paragraph. It was my little sister's birthday yesterday. We went to a Chinese restaurant. We went there at 7. I had tried Chinese food before, but my little sister had not. We liked the restaurant very much. And I know we say to students, there's no tense in Chinese. Please don't think from the perspective of tenses when you approach the Chinese language. But they're English native speakers or they're European language speakers. They can't help. They have to, when they read something, go from the angle of tenses. So very naturally, they will notice all these words here. So they will see past tense, past tense, past tense, past perfect, and simple past tense. And that's what they would think when they approach this English paragraph. Okay, so like I said, shared language of your classroom is very rich resources. So why not use it? Give your students before class all these translations to show them that although the first 3 sentences are all of a simple past tense in English, they are said in different ways in Chinese. Different structures are used for them. Why? Encourage them to think the question, why? And ask them, number 4, why? And number 5, we liked the restaurant very much. Again, this is a simple past tense if we go from the tense point of view. Why? There's nothing special used. So throw these questions to your students and ask them to think before class. And then in this class, no matter whether it takes place in a classroom or online, you would invite your students' opinion first, and you must give feedback on your students' opinion. And then you decide how much to teach. And of course, you had already decided when you taught that class how much to teach to go how far. And let's come back to these sentences that I just showed you. And maybe it's a good time for me to share with you what the discussions were like in my classroom. So for the first sentence, I ask a student whether there is any special structure used to say it was my little sister's birthday. Students would say no, and I would ask them why. And many of them would say it's because we have used 昨天, the word. I said, yes, 昨天 is necessary to show when it was, but it's not the direct reason why we haven't used any special structure to make it clear that it was my little sister's birthday yesterday. We have no tense in Chinese. When we talk about yesterday being my little sister's birthday, we approach it as a fact. So it's a fact. It was a birthday. So we don't need anything. There's no action involved there. And when we talk about we went to a Chinese restaurant, I ask a student, why do you want to say that sentence? What is the purpose of you saying that sentence? Students will say, well, it's because I want to tell you what I did. So you will say, yes, exactly. If your intention is to tell people for the first time what you did at a point of time in the past, you go for the le structure. And at that point, I haven't taught anything. I haven't taught any of the le, shi, de, or guo structure. All I want them to do is to have a very general picture of the fact that we would have to go for different structures when we approach the past events. So we have to choose in our heads which one to go for. That is very important because very often we see that if we teach le, shi, de, guo separately, when we teach them, students know how to use them. But when it comes to speaking and writing, their shi, de, or le are all over the place. Especially normally when we teach le first, if we don't tell them about the very existence of shi de, they would feel very frustrated because after that class, they may try to say something like, 昨天我去了朋友家，我去了7点. So you would say, no, you can't use that. And they will say, so what should I use? And if you haven't even give them some general idea of the very existence of shi de, you will get stuck. So it's a very good idea to paint a general picture for them first, and then to tackle in following hours, class hours, these structures separately. You could deal with them in different weeks even, or even different semesters if have to, but at first, it's very important to paint them a general picture. So that's le. And we went there at 7. So again, you ask your students, why? Why do you want to say this sentence? What is the purpose of saying that sentence? So I owe this actually to one of my previous students when I was working at the University of Edinburgh. This student, I'm quoting him, saying that, I think I have worked out when to use shi de. You have already told someone what you did, and you want to expand on what you have already told them. So you go for 是的, and you use 是的 to highlight the information that you want to really talk about. I think that's a brilliant explanation. Let's go for it. Yes, we can say to our students that if you want to say for the first time that you did something at a point of time in the past, you go for le. And if you want to give some further information on this already established information, you go for 是的. You use 是的 to give further information. And very often we come across sentences where so students will actually naturally ask you, does that mean that I have to say a sentence with le first and then a sentence 是的? You say, yes, in many cases, but not all the cases, because in a lot of situations in real life, the le information, something has already happened, information is established in the context. So for example, if I come to you and the very sentence I say to you is 你好，我是北京来的，你呢? And I have already come. You can see me, so that's established in the context. I don't have to say 你好，我来了，我是从北京来的. So you don't have to do that. So make that clear to your students as well if they ask you further questions. And when it comes to 过, it's relatively easier for students to understand because you're talking about past events. You're talking about past experience. So you have experience to doing something. That's something relatively easier for students to understand. But sometimes they will ask you, does it mean that the 过 structure is linked with present perfect tense or past perfect tense? You say no. Think from the angle of past experience. The last sentence can be a bit tricky when we say we like the restaurant very much. We don't need anything special. And normally, the students couldn't come up with a very clever explanation for it. And I would help them in the end to say that, you see, when you say you liked something, you just liked it, it's in your head. It has nothing to do with active action. So you don't need anything to express that idea in Chinese. You see, all of these are very simple language, easy rules to follow, something that they can understand logically. These are good rules that you can give to students for them to follow. And in my class, I would normally give them another paragraph in English. Of course, I won't ask them to translate that paragraph. I will ask them to just tell me what kind of structure they may think they would need going through that paragraph. So I would say, it was cold last May. They would shout to me, nothing. I ran the Edinburgh Marathon. Le, why? Because you did. You want to tell us what you did? I ran with my friends. 是的. Why? Because you want to tell us who you went with. They had run marathons before, but I had not. 过. Why? Because experience, it's past experience. I loved the experience. Nothing. Why? Because you loved it. It's not an action, it's in your head. You see, students at least can have some general picture of the structures that they should go for. That's a very, very important first step when it comes to approaching the structures that we need, talking about the past. And so these are points where you ask the questions that I just show you. And after that, you would talk about the structures one by one. And like I said just now, it does not need to be in the same week. It could be in different weeks, depending on what textbook you use, or even different semesters. And my preferred sequence is le followed by 是的 by 过. And frequent exercise, context is a must. Avoiding mechanical exercises. And after class, consolidation, exercises are very, very important. I will give you some example. I won't go into details, but I will give you some example of the exercises that I give to my students. Now, have a very quick look at this text here on the screen. Ask yourself when the text be suitable for your students. The text should only be provided to your students after they have already learned all the three structures, le, 是的, and 过, because they have all appeared in the text. And what kind of tasks can you set based on this text? Various. It could be reading comprehension, it could be translation, it could be listening comprehension if you don't show it to them first, but reading them out for them. Or it should be summarizing exercise. You tell them this whole story and ask them to summarize what happened in their own words. A lot of various exercise can be set. And now I will just show you another one that I would use with this text. I ask students, why? 住 is just 住在北京 when I talk about when I was 15. Why no special structure is needed. Why 是 no special structure is needed. Why 去 no special structure needed. Why 唱歌 no special structure needed. So I would go through all the sentences and ask them why. In all the first several sentences, no special structure, no 是, no 了, no 是的, no 过 is used. And we will have a discussion. And then when it comes to 学过, we will be talking about the function of 过. And this is a tricky one. Students would normally be trapped by me. So I say, why 太忙了? Why? There's no action. Why 太忙了? And some would fall into the trap, some would not, and some would realize, well, yeah, it's just the 太了 structure. It has nothing to do with the 了 that we need to talk about the past. And when you have discussed all these elements for the first paragraph, and of course, you can do the same thing with the second paragraph, and your students would give you better answers compared to when they were discussing about the first paragraph. So when whatever exercise you said, it must be helpful to enhance communication and autonomous learning through these tasks. And I will give you another example. So normally I would give them another example in English. And again, when will this text be suitable for students? Again, it has to be after all the structures have been taught. And what kind of tasks? Various tasks. And again, I will encourage you to enhance communication and autonomous learning through the tasks that you set to your students. And thank you very much. These are all the elements that I would like to discuss with you today. And you can see my email address on the screen. I will welcome you to get in touch with me and to discuss issues and elements related to Chinese grammar or the teaching of Chinese grammar. It's full of fun. I only had time to talk about a little bit about the teaching of grammar. There are enormous number of issues and questions and elements that we should take into consideration when it comes to teaching grammar. I would really hope to see that we can form possibly some working group to work on this, to explore the effective methods that we can go for to teach. And I haven't touched upon the teaching younger learners. And possibly when there is an opportunity, we can concentrate on this topic as well. Our next speaker, Xuan Laoshi from SOAS, has a lot of expertise and experience in teaching younger learners. But today, her topic is not about teaching younger learners. She will be sharing with you her thoughts on how to teach reading and writing online. Thank you, Xuan Laoshi. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Juju. Am I sharing the right file? It's locked. Am I sharing the right one?
I'm just having a look. Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah, just put it into full screen mode and it should be okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all the teachers and colleagues. I am Xuan Li. So I am the last speaker for today's session, today's webinar, and also today's webinar is the last session of the series of 4 webinars we have been held in past 8 weeks. So thank you for staying with us and joining us for this journey. So today, I would like to follow my previous session and just to share some reflections on how to teach reading and writing online. Okay, in my previous session, I've shared my ideas of teaching reading. We have to identify the different kind of reading skills, which is integrated into reading teaching reading. Okay, so that means if you want to teach the students, you have to identify what kind of skills you want to train the students, and you can design a suitable exercise to our students. I also covered a little bit of writing. Okay, so I have some overlap with Zhou Lao Shi. Excuse me. So the students learning writing, they develop their skills through a small blocks such as characters or words, and then gradually they start to move to sentences and paragraphs and longer text. So here are the questions. I basically received quite a lot of questions, and I selected 4 of them to answer in my session today. The question 1 is, what are the most effective ways to teach grammar, reading, and writing online? I believe Zhu has shared lots of her experience in details in previous 30 minutes with you, so I will skip that. In terms of effective ways to teach reading and writing online, so this question is built in lots of different aspects. First of all is online teaching, and second is teaching reading and writing. So in here, due to the time constraints, I only share some basic ideas and reflections on this question. I welcome all these questions because these questions make me think more and think more clearer. Okay, so effective way is constrained by what kind of courses you're teaching, and also constrained by what kind of textbook you're using. So we're not a single unit in this teaching activities. Okay, so you are constrained by lots of elements in this teaching activity. So what kind of books you're using, what kind of students you're facing, and how many contact hours, and in which form of teaching. So if you take everything into consideration, you will find probably there's only one way to teach, which is most suitable one to yourself, to this situation, will be the time. We're not wasting a lot of time. Okay, the workload is affordable and useful. So I would say there's no effective ways to teaching reading and writing in a general uniform. So you have to think about lots of other elements and try different ways, and may find a suitable way which can keep a balance among all these elements. So the answer, there's no most effective way. Okay, you need to explore different ways. Okay, but don't trap yourself into this, because you need to keep balance, because reading and writing are only part of the skills. You have other things you need to consider as well. Next question is related to question 1. How do we improve students' learning, reading and writing skills? This actually related to what kind of skills we aim at. So that related to my previous session, is to analyze the reading skills and the writing skills. So once we can identify the target, we can identify what kind of skills we aim at, and then we'll be able to start to set up suitable exercise for that. Next question is, how do we construct an interactive feedback mechanism for Chinese reading and writing teaching? I like this question particularly because I like the words of construct. Okay, I also like the words interactive, and also I love the words of mechanism. Okay, this actually linked to what I shared in previous session. Remember, I shared my experiences when I started to teach online. I explored lots of different things, and towards the end I realized the best way is the reliable big company and provide free apps and softwares to use. So basically towards the end I goes to recommend 2 big family. Okay, one is the Google family, another one is Microsoft 365. So I actually think the online teaching is really useful to teach reading and writing. It is much better than the face-to-face classroom teaching. think about in the classroom. What we're having in the classroom is we'll probably will introduce the grammar, we'll give a grammar lecture, and we will ask the students to do some translations or some dictations. So we can't really go for details to train the reading and writing. We can see the output. But with the online teaching, okay, actually we can do better with more details. For example, these slides I used last session. Okay, so this is one of the reading comprehension. So basically what I can do is I can use the Google form to create a reading comprehension exercise, and the students can do it and I can see the feedback. So I can get the feedback straight away. Another good feature for this one is the students can do it again if they get a wrong answer. And also this Google form will allow you to provide a correct answer and the students can measure their own progress on their own. Okay, so this is very useful. And next one is I just mentioned this one. You can see this is also from the previous session. This is Google Docs. Okay, I love this Google Docs because they provide interactive between me and the students in terms of writing and reading. Okay, so for example, I give the question to say in your country, okay, what is people's concept or ideas of choose a job? Okay, I provide the answer. I have several students who are all typing answers at the same time. So basically, I can keep a monitoring of at least here, you can see 4 students writing at the same time, which I cannot do in the traditional classroom. Okay, and another thing is, while I provide example, the students look at my example, they can reshape what they're writing. So they're learning from me straight away. Another thing is the students are learning from each other. So if one student get a really good sentence, another one probably will pick up some words they want to learn as well. Another thing, I can give a feedback or individual attention, as Juju just mentioned, because I can correct in here the blocked bracket is my comments. I can teach the words, usage of words, and also I can even give a student, a weak student, obviously S3 is a weak student. Her sentence is shorter and idea is very simple. I also can showing some appraisal for that. I can say, yeah, I never know in Slavic what's happening. Okay, thank you for sharing this information. So this one will create an interactive platform for me to share the ideas of reading and writing. Okay, good. And now I just to say, I already shared this one, is a Google family have lots of things, okay, you can use. And also you can find the OneNote actually is Microsoft 365 family. Okay, so whether your school support which system or they purchase what kind of license, you should stick to it and try to explore all the usage of the family products because they probably share lots of things together. Okay, last question. Are there any suitable online reading and reading resources? Okay, another question very similar. Any other supplementary reading materials suitable for the students with a level of HSK3? So I have to say there are plenty of resources, okay, resources available, but the thing is whether you have enough time to search and whether you will stick to what selected suitable material and recycle it because our time is limited. You can't spend all the time to hunting for the suitable material. You should make the best usage of something you already find. Okay, so commonly used tools, just to quickly mentioned, Quizlet, you already know that. Okay, so that is very good for you learn vocabulary. And the Pleco, almost all of our students have a Pleco on their mobile phone. Okay, they can learn vocabulary or find the words as they like. And this one is called Arch Chinese. If any teacher want to create a writing pad, this is very useful. Okay, and another thing I like is called the line dictionary. So this one can help you to search any fixed expressions or quotations. So very suitable for the intermediate level students when they prepare for their writing. Okay, so they can learn some phrases or you input the other way around. Okay, another thing you may try is called fast fingers. Okay, so this one actually can help if we have to use typing. Okay, this one's very useful. You can test your typing, Chinese typing. Okay, you can have a competition with your classmates to say who will be the person who type fast. Also, you can type your own articles. Okay, so very, very useful if you want to try it. Next one is Chairman's Bow. Okay, so the Chairman's Bow is created by several graduates from Manchester University and now become a very dominant, well-received sources for reading. Okay, the idea for the Chairman's Bow is they use the same story but rewrite the story fit in HSK level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically, you can use the same, you are reading the same story, okay, but use the different levels of Chinese vocabulary, okay, which is corresponding to the HSK levels. So simple stories you can read, okay, about what's happening in the flood in North Yorkshire, okay, and then you can read a more advanced or more intermediate level about the same story, okay. So this is a very good one, but they charge, okay. So if your university or school will subscribe that, this is very useful. Okay, another one is pop-up Chinese. The good thing for this website, if you want to teach students to read Chinese, they have a built-in add-ons to translate the words they do not know, basically instant dictionary. Okay, so just you move your mouse and then they show you the English translation. So again, it's very suitable for the intermediate level students to explore the Chinese websites for free. Okay, so this is very useful. And the last one I would like to introduce is 爱汉语. Okay, so this website is created by 北京汉语国际推广中心 and also BNU 北京师范大学. They have a corpus. Okay, corpus is very useful to help you to find how to use a word and how to find suitable sample sentences. They also have the teaching lesson preparation assistant. They also have graded reading. So this is related to the level reading as well. And then they have a writing assistant and other sources. Okay, so I just to show you how to use the corpus. Corpus 1, if you, for example, I choose the word 提高, and then they can find 4,955 sentences. So all the sentence you can use for further exercise after you teach the 提高. Of course, you have to adjust the level. Okay, but it's all authentic sentences. Another one is very useful from the same website. It's called 词语搭配. Okay, core location search. So I just input 快乐. And then they give you the 快乐 appeared in different phrases. You also can select what kind of combination you would like to have. Okay, so this is a very useful website, and I hope you will enjoy using it. Okay, so just to announce, this is the basically end of my presentation, and just would like to promote the upcoming event, create a call arranged by Macmillan Education and the Confucius Institute at Brooks University. So that next session will be in July 16th, same time on Thursday, and we will have 2 speakers to share their experience on communicative activities and also digital sources to teach spoken Chinese. Okay, so this is an upcoming event. I hope you will stay with us and join the next session. Okay, this is the information about Macmillan. I have finished my session. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lick, and to the rest of our team for the fantastic webinars we've had over the last few weeks. This was the final session out of the 4 webinars, so I hope you enjoyed them, and I can tell from the feedback I've received that they were really useful and beneficial to our attendees. Thank you so much to our team as well for all their hard work that they've put into the webinars, and as you can see, it's reflected in the feedback that we've received. If you do have any questions, feel free to email us, whether it is for an access code or for further information. The PowerPoint and the webinar recording will be provided by email in the coming days, so do look out for that as well. And yes, please do subscribe to our next webinar. Information will follow in an email in the coming days as well. So just to say thank you so much again to our lovely ladies who did a great, fantastic job over the last couple of weeks. Do appreciate all the content that you've provided, and also to the attendees who joined our sessions. So for now, just to say thank you again and stay safe as always. And we look forward to seeing you in the coming webinar in the next few weeks. Take care and hopefully see you soon. Bye.